and welcome once again to the Brett Chat Sport or BCS podcast. This week I'm going to be combining two of my main loves, sport and movies, to talk all about sports movies. Films about sport have been being made for as long as film has existed. Some of the earliest pieces of British film, for example, are of men playing cricket and women playing tennis. And while cricket is a decidedly Commonwealth sport, and so there are limited films about that, tennis is truly international. And so there have been films made about tennis throughout film's history, including recently King Richard, for which Will Smith won the Best Actor Oscar, and the decidedly sexy film Challengers. Films are also popular all over, and so we are going to be hearing from a number of contributors throughout this episode on what their favourite sports movies are. And so let's start by hearing from a number of friends of the show, starting with George Martin.
Best sports movie of all time, eh? Many people I'm sure would go with the standard answers of Raging Bull, Moneyball, or maybe even Jerry Maguire, but I'm going to go in a different direction with Rocky IV. The 1976 original is rightly lauded as one of the most endearing, universal and evergreen movies ever made, but let's go from the sublime to the outright insane and talk about its third sequel from 1985. A movie which clocks in at a brief 91 minutes, of which a staggering 29 minutes of it are comprised by various montages. That's 32% of the entire film. It sums up quite accurately how chaotic the movie is, but oh my goodness, what a thrill ride.
Hey, I'm Jessie Depp, and I am here to say that Rookie of the Year is one of the best sports movie all time. Seriously, a kid breaks his arm and suddenly throws 100 miles an hour for the Cubs. Absolute chaos, but absolute perfection. It gives heart, it's funny, and it has that 90s peak magic.
Hi, my name's Andrew Beasley and I'm a football writer, but despite that, my favourite sports movie is not a football movie because all films about football are terrible. There's a certain charm to Escape to Victory, but nobody would call it a classic. I think my favourite film about sport is probably Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull, about the boxer Jake LaMotta. But if I'm allowed to say a sort of sports documentary, then When We Were Kings, also about boxing, is fantastic. It's about the fight in Zaire between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman when Ali got the world title back at 32 after missing several years of his career for objected about potentially going to Vietnam as a soldier. And it's just a really interesting look at how he was viewed and Foreman, and how basically nobody thought Ali was going to win, and then he did, and how Africa responded to both of them and stuff like that. So that would be my choice for best sports film.
When talking about sports movies, we also have to remember that people love a whole range of sports, and so sports movies, for different reasons. On this point, here is Jason Durr.
Hi, my name's Jason. I'm here to tell you what is the greatest sports movie of all time. But I'm going to give some shout outs to some other movies before I tell you which one is my absolute favorites. For baseball, it's got to be Bull Durham and Major League. Those are always 1A and 1B. I can't differentiate between the two. I love them both so much. For basketball, for seriousness, you've got Hoosiers. For comedy, White Men Can't Jump. Both are great. The remake of White Men Can't Jump sucks. Don't ever bother. For NFL, it's The Waterboy. Funny movie, got Adam Sandler. It was an automatic classic as soon as it came out. Very quotable. For golf, Caddyshack. Absolute classic, quotable movie. A lot of fun. But the best sports movie of all time is a hockey movie. And you've probably not heard of it, but it's called Slapshot. It's got Paul Newman. He plays a coach and player in a old-time dying hockey town. It's got the Hanson brothers. These guys are great. It's funny. It's from the 70s. It's completely unhinged, and I absolutely recommend it. So if you're ever going to see a sports movie, I recommend Slapshot.
There are times when you ask a contributor to tell you what their favourite sports movie is, and because of who they are, they tell you even more than that. On that note, let's hear from friend of the show, Dr. Mimi Thebo.
Hi, my name's Amy Thebo. I'm a massive Kansas City Chiefs fan. I'm also an author and direct the creative writing programs at the University of Bristol. And I suppose it's no surprise what I'm going to say about films, sports films. And I think we love them for the same reason we love sport, that They are stories with characters that we grow to care very much about. And in sport, especially the sports that I love, there's always this moment when the ball is coming down and time stops, and it all depends on what happens next, whether there's going to be redemption, victory, or a terrible tragedy. We can see that really clearly in sport, and I think the best way to see it on film is in baseball movies. Because of the isolated nature of the pitcher and the batter and the fielders. They're all spread out, very clearly kind of silhouetted at that critical moment when everything has to happen or it doesn't. So having established baseball movies, where do you go from there? I was really torn. I love the sexiness and the kind of camaraderie and the understanding of how the physical body and aging affects this in Bull Durham. I love the natural, but when it really came down to what sport means and what it is, I have to go for Field of Dreams, where sport transcends everything, even death.
Thank you to Mimi for giving us such great analysis there. As always, Mimi has done nothing but add value to one of my episodes, and I greatly appreciate her for that. It is not just academics who, when you say to them, hey, could you send us a 30-second clip, tell me what your favourite sports movie is, they actually go and send you a lot more than that. And so on that note, let's hear from one of my favourite friends of the show, Freddie Law Keane.
Hi, I'm Freddie for Brett Chat Sports, and Fever Pitch, the football version, is my favourite sports film. I think the reason Fever Pitch is my favourite sports film, first off, it's easy because I'm an Arsenal fan, and it does centre the emotional climax of the film around one of Arsenal's greatest achievements, winning the league over Liverpool, in the last minutes of the game to win 2-0, to win the first division. And it's one of the greatest moments of the club's history, and it gives a film around that moment. But I think one of the reasons I love that film so much is because I saw it with my dad. He showed it to me, and it's not a relationship anyone really should ever get to choose. You're sort of given to you when you're young, and it sort of lives through you. And if you're lucky, you get saddled with a good team, and the expectations are high, and then the miseries are higher because bad seasons feel worse, but good seasons, can come again. And the joy of those two characters living through that moment together at the end of the film just means quite a lot to me. An interesting thing about that film is when I showed it to my girlfriend Liv about a year into dating, when she knew I was an Arsenal fan, she thought the main character, who was dating someone who didn't understand football, a lot like me and my girlfriend, and she thought, wow, he is a really bad boyfriend. He doesn't understand the impact of this football team is having on their relationship. And, it was a funny take, because I totally understand that when you come from the outside and a lot of your joy, a lot of your emotions are tied up in sports teams that you kind of don't really know why you care about them. You just were told to from a young age, and then you do for the rest of your life. And then it impacts, oh, I can't go out tonight, Arsenal are on, or I'd love to cook for you, but I'm going to be at the game, or I'm seeing the game at a pub, and it can affect you a lot. And my girlfriend always said that the main character in that film was a bad boyfriend, and he didn't care that much. And, to centre his life around Arsenal that much showed he was not in a good committed space. And it was quite interesting because, I'm an Arsenal fan, I do those things, and, we had a young relationship, but a good relationship. And then myself and Liv moved to the Emirates, and we lived above the museum, and every single match day we stood on our balcony and we watched 60,000 fans, and even more actually, people who wouldn't go to the games, standing, arriving, walking, drinking, milling around and being around. And I think Liv's attitude changed, and we were able to see firsthand the effect the football teams can have on families and family dynamics, and creating communities between friends, parents, siblings, lovers, and what it means to people, what that club means to North London. And, you know, if we hadn't moved there, would Liv have softened on Arsenal? I mean, she loves me an awful lot, so I'm hoping so. But when we moved there and we got to watch all the people and watch all the joy that it brought, and recently we watched the film again. We had to leave the Emirates, and we don't live above the museum anymore, but we watched the film again, and she turned to me and said, no, I get it. This means more. And it's quite nice to see, you know, a healthy amount of emotion, especially for men, tied up in finding joy in things. It's quite an uncontrollable feeling, and when there is this much joy attached to it, it means an awful lot. And it was quite nice to see that my girlfriend's stance on that had changed. And, you know, it was a film I watched with my dad, a film I showed to people who I love, trying to, like, find some sympathy, find some joy. Didn't get the response I expected. And now, through time and through my relationship developing and through my relationship with Arsenal, my relationship with Liv, you relate to a lot of those characters. And, you know, it's a film that will always be special. I'm hoping Arsenal have another golden moment like that again sometime soon. And I'm sure my girlfriend will be there to celebrate with me. So, Arsenal's my club, and Fever Pitch is my favourite sports film.
Thank you to Freddie for sending me that wonderful piece there. And also thank you to him for specifying the football version of Fever Pitch, because it highlights that sports movies, as with all genre of films, do get remade. The American remake of Fever Pitch was instead about baseball, and so it was called The Perfect Catch over here in the UK. I think all the contributions that we've had so far also highlight that there does seem to be a division in our favourite types of sports movies, and these do seem to be along national lines, whereas the British contributors have said football and boxing films, two sports that are very popular here in the UK. The American contributors have tended to talk about movies based on American sports, particularly baseball. And I think a lot of this is to do with our upbringing. We in Britain are brought up playing and watching football, cricket, tennis, rugby, and in some cases boxing. And so those are the films that will very much enter not just our consciousness, but the national consciousness. And the same is true in America. Americans are brought up playing and watching baseball because it is the national pastime, and so those films that are based on baseball will very much enter the national psyche. To give an example, I am of the age where I remember watching Rookie of the Year and the 90s remake of Angels in the Outfield when I was a kid, but they didn't make me a fan of baseball at the time because I wasn't brought up playing and watching baseball. That being said, here is what friend of the show Jo Lenton had to say when I asked her what her favourite sports movie is.
My favourite sports film is A League of Their Own, the 1992 Penny Marshall classic, which was based on the Professional Women's Baseball League during the war, and all about the Rockford Peaches and the relationship between the players and the team, the sport, how the culture was at the time, because all the guys had gone away fighting in the war and stuff like that. But there are a few reasons why it's my favourite, because believe it or not, back then I wasn't actually a massive baseball fan, so I guess that must have piqued an interest somewhere, and that interest hibernated for a few years until it manifested in a love of the Mets. Won't dwell on that. I don't know, the things I kind of really liked about it was because at the time, 1992 is a long time ago, and I wasn't, how old was I? 11 or something. That is a long time ago. But it was one of the first times I'd ever kind of seen a film about women playing sport, and it was like, oh my god, what's this all about? But it was so cool because there was obviously loads of different players on the team, and all kind of represented a different type of personality and a different character. So it was so cool to see people you could identify with in different ways playing sport, even if they were forced to wear skirts at the time and all that. But dirt in the skirt and all that. But it was cool because it was obviously based on a true story. And at the time, I just remember watching it over and over and over again with my sister, because there was obviously that relationship between Dottie and her sister as well. So that was cool. So we used to love watching it over and over again. got to that quite annoying point where we just started repeating the lines before they even said them, which is always a great one for anyone else watching a film at the same time. But it was also really, really, really funny. I just loved it. I think it was a bit of a tearjerker in places too, but like I say, it was that representation of seeing women playing sport, and it was something, it'll be a film that'll stay with me for a long time, and it's probably something I should watch again soon actually. But yeah, a bit of Marla Hooch, I reckon. That's my kind of identifying character in that. So you can make of that what you will. But I suppose the cool thing too now, if talking about this film now, it's taken from when those women were playing football back, war times, to literally the present day when there's potentially going to be a women's professional baseball league again, which is mad. All that time has passed, which says a lot about society and how things have moved slowly in certain areas since then. So yeah, that, as well as loving the film, I'm also loving the fact that this many years later, we're going to get 4 professional women's baseball teams. So that's quite a nice little way to wrap up. But yeah, favourite film of all time, A League of Their Own. Let's go Peaches. See you later.
I think A League of Their Own is a wonderful example of what a sports movie can do. Sports movies, as with all genre of movies, can do a wonderful job of shining a light on both historical issues and society as a whole. For example, I would not know that there was a women's league during World War II if it was not for having watched A League of Their Own. And that is a wonderful thing, because I as a viewer am now better informed about both history and society as a whole. And as someone who views Joe Lenton as not just a friend of the show, but also at the very least a good acquaintance now, it is lovely to know that A League of Their Own was such an inspiration to both her and her sister. With all that being said, I'd also like to remind you about something Jessie Depp said during the Philadelphia Sports Special earlier this year.
And look at Rocky. We gave, Philadelphia gave the world one of the best underdog movies of all time, Rocky. And Philadelphia is an underdog city.
And Jessie makes a very good point there. Rocky is synonymous with the city of Philadelphia, and the city of Philadelphia is synonymous with Rocky, to such an extent that I would say that the city of Philadelphia is a character within those films. And that is then true when you visit the city of Philadelphia too. I went there many years ago, and one of the things I made a point of doing was walking up to the Philadelphia Museum of Art to look at the Rocky statue, run up the Rocky steps, and then stand where Rocky had stood, because that is part of the tourist experience of going to that city, precisely because of the films. And the thing is, Rocky is a boxing film, yes, but it's not a film about boxing. Boxing is merely the backdrop from which a study of the character of Rocky Balboa is done. As good as the boxing sequences are in that film, you are not watching those films for the boxing. You are watching those films because you care about the character of Rocky Balboa. And to a lesser extent, the same is also true of the Creed films, which operate within the same universe. You are watching the journey of Adonis Creed across those 3 films. Not to ruin those films for you, but I would say that the heart of the first Creed film is the fact that Rocky, this character that the audience had known for 40 years at that point, gets ill. And the best part about Creed 2 is that very last scene where a now healthy again Rocky reconciles with his son and gets to meet his grandson for the first time. Because ultimately, as much as they are sports films, you watch the Rocky films because you come to love the character of Rocky and those around him. And the same is true of other sports films. Raging Bull, for example. The boxing sequences in that film are incredible. What Scorsese did in that film informs what other directors then did for years to come when filming boxing sequences. But ultimately, That film is about Jake the Bull LaMotta. It's why the film is called Raging Bull. And ultimately, this is the power of sports movies. Sport is used as a backdrop to explore wider themes, whether it is personal relationships, historical issues, or society as a whole. We, as an audience, connect with the characters because we have dealt with those issues ourselves. That is why it's the character's name that is more often than not on the marquee, because it is the character that we connect with. And the same is as true for Fever Pitch as it is for Rocky. Yes, that is a film about the character's love of Arsenal, but ultimately it's a film about the character and his relationships and how his sports fandom is adversely affecting his relationship. And I'm sure there are people in my life who would say that my love of sports and my love of films and this podcast are all impediments to other areas of my life. But hey, let's not get into that now. I am someone who grew up really enjoying both playing and watching basketball, and I still continue to enjoy watching American sports, as well as having a love of movies that has gone on so long and has been such a big part of my life that I even have a master's degree in film studies. And so it has been an absolute joy to share a combination of those loves with you in this episode. And on that note, this brings an end to this episode of the BCS podcast. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and I certainly do hope to see you again next time. Bye bye now. The BCS podcast is written, produced, edited and hosted by me, Brett Walker. Thank you to Boban Apostolov and Pixabay for the use of the music and sound effects in this episode. This episode features contributions from Andrew Beasley, Jesse Depp, Jason Durr, Freddie Lawkeen, Joe Lenton, George Martin and Dr. Mimi Febo.